Morning, folks. Welcome back. I'm off out on my bike this morning if you want to come along and join me. Now, normally I show you a route and along the way show you any interesting historical stuff I spot. But I thought today we'd turn it on its head. And so today it's not so much a route, it's more just showing you the local history and myths of an area. So I'm starting with Sandbach today because it's an area I know because I've been living here. And I moved here about 1995. I married a girl from Sandbach, so I have to live in Sandbach. And so some of the things today I'll be talking about are oral stuff. That's stuff that people have told me over the years. And the thing to note about that is things can get muddled up. So I might not be right. The other thing is I'll also be talking about stuff I've read off the internet. And as with all history, whatever period, one, some of this stuff that's been written down is based on oral history, which might be muddled. And two, it can be written by people who've got an agenda. So, again, take it all with a pinch of salt. If you know more about the area, more about the topics we cover today, bob it in the comments. And if you know loads and loads about where you live and you think it's interesting, drop me a line and maybe I'll come and have a visit and see your history. Right, anyway, let's get cracking. Here's a piece of history in my own backyard, an old Murgatroyd sign. They were a big employer around here. They started in Middlewich, making salt from brine, and then opened a plant here at Elworth in Sandbach. They had a vacuum salt plant and then a chlorine caustic soda plant that used electrolysis, which is interesting to me because they used the Hargreaves bird cell, and I'm a direct relation to James Hargreaves. I've still got some of his lab books, actually. They also had a plant making hydrochloric acid because they produced more chlorine than they needed. When I first moved to Sandbach, the plant here was Hayes Chemicals, and I remember them testing the alarms on the fences, very loud, that were there, I guess, to let you know if chlorine gas escaped, though I'm not sure what good the alarm would do if a cloud of chlorine gas came your way. Let's drop down the hill now, past Waitrose, and then we're going to turn left up High Street. On High Street on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see St Mary's Church. There's been a church on the site for a very long time. The Domesday Book of 1086 says there was a priest and a church here, and then there was a sandstone church which weathered badly. The current church mostly dates from the Victorian period, when Sir George Gilbert Scott came along and gave us what we see today. On the left-hand side of High Street, you'll see the Old Hall Hotel, which dates from 1656 and stands on the site of a previous manor house from the 13th century, which burnt down. And I guess the Lord of the Manor lived there. I actually know the site quite well because I used to run the website for them, so I've had the full tour. So for instance, next time you visit, take a left through the main door and look at the panelling on the right-hand side. If you look up high, you'll see some holes and there's a hidden door there. Now you're saying, 1656, that's too late to be a priest hole. Well, actually the wood panelling didn't come from here. It was salvaged from an older property, so it is quite possible that it was a priest hole in its original use. There certainly is a hidden space behind the panelling because I've seen it. The other story I've heard about the Old Hall is that there was a secret tunnel from the Old Hall through to the church. Now obviously it wouldn't be the current church, it must have been the old sandstone one, I guess. But there is certainly something to that, in that if you go down into the cellar, and I have been, there is a tunnel down there which is collapsed a short distance in. Whether that is the tunnel that went across to the church or whether it's part of the old original structure of the building, I don't know. Do you? Let me know in the comments. The cobbles and the crosses, of course, need no introduction. The crosses are believed to date from the 9th century when Christianity was first brought to the area. There are some more fragments of crosses up by the church. Let's go and have a look. Let's head round the back of the church hall. The church hall actually used to be a school at one point, I believe. And then we reach St Mary's, which is worth a look inside if you've not been. And here are some more of those fragments. Fascinating. And so we pass the Black Bear Inn, even older than the old hall. It dates from 1634. And then we continue up the main street, where you can see the town hall and the Swan and Chequer. Did you know that Winston Churchill gave a speech here in 1945? And then the Scotch Common here. So there's stories about the retreating Scottish troops camping in Sandbach and being attacked by the locals, and I was told they're all buried under here. But then I've heard another story online that there's actually a large burial site up past the motorway where the old motel used to be. I remember that. I was still here when I first moved here, and that was it called Piper's Hollow. Let's head up there. During the English Civil War, a Scottish army headed down to Worcester and gave battle, but then were forced to retreat. And on the 3rd of September 1651, about 1,000 of them camped somewhere around here at Sandbach. The locals didn't take kindly to this and attacked them in the night and killed some of them. It then becomes a bit hazy. Where were they buried? And there's a tale of Piper's Hollow, which you can see up past the motorway. Now, it's called Piper's Hollow, they believe, after a Scottish piper who played his pipes for his fallen comrades. And then we come into other myths. The people saying, driving down the M6 in Sandbach at night, that they can hear the sound of bagpipes. How much of this is true? I don't know. Do you know? Let me know. So, as we're at this end of town, we might as well head up to Sandbach Heath. If you head up past the church on the left-hand side, there's a footpath, and from here you can do a little walk around the quarry, which is really interesting. The sand quarry here, you can see quite clearly that there's only a few feet of topsoil and then a huge amount of sand. The sand was deposited here when this was all a shallow sea during the Triassic, of course. But I think it's interesting because of the name, Sandbach. So originally Sandbach, then Sandbach, and that I believe Sandbach, it comes from the Anglo-Saxon, meaning sandy stream or sandy valley. So, yeah, it's the sand that gave it its name. So from here, I'm going to head through Sandbach Heath and then through down to Malkin's Bank, which once upon a time was a hive of industry, all gone now. Here we are at Malkin's Bank, the Trent and Mersey Canal ahead. If you turn left on that, you'd find yourself in Hanley. Turn right through to Middlewich, And there was a train line here as well, which has long since gone, but given us some nice walks, the Salt Line and the Wheelock Rail Trail. And of course, back in the day, they allowed the transport of goods. So there was lots of stuff going on. So down at Wheelock, for instance, they extracted salt. And then off the back of that, there was a chemical works at the Zan. And up here at Malkin's Bank, another one, Brunner Mond, had an alkali plant here. And then it ended up being a large tip where both Brunner Mond and Murgatroyds dumped stuff, which ended up being a bit of a mess actually. And a lot of work went into turning it into this nice golf course that's there now. If you take a walk across the golf course though, there's a stream, and if you pause by the stream, you can still smell it. The chemicals that leached into the ground here. Here's a bridge that would have looked very different back in the day. Was the entrance to the works here. I'm going to head back into town now and then head down to Wheelock. Let's have a explore down on the rail trail. Okay, so we've joined the rail trail and we're here by what was the old station, the old platform. So we'll just follow it through down towards Elworth. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of the rail line. In 1852, a short branch line was opened here by the North Staffs Rail Company. It was then extended in 1866 to connect it to the London line, and passenger services started in 1893. Running between Etley Heath and Kidsgrove, with sidings to access Brunner Mond up at Malkin's Bank and the salt works down at Wheelock. It was really all about that industrial stuff, really, to connect, to get the salt and the raw materials and the finished product out from the chemical works and salt works. Interestingly, if you've watched my video up at Cheddleton, the signal box that used to stand on this line is still in service. They've just put it in at Cheddleton now instead. A short diversion now, we take a right and then head down Abbey Road. You have to think about all the people who must have walked down this tree-lined drive over the years, because of course down at this end was Foden's. Now the only trace you can see is, if you look here, this little building, which I believe used to be a tobacconist's, so you could get a bit of tobacco on your way to and from. And so now I'm going to head down Salt Line Way. The clues of the name. This new road must at one point have been part of that old rail line. At the end we're going to take a left and head down to Moston. I think it's time we had a quick look at Stabbers Bridge. So ahead, all these houses on the right are built on the site of the old Foden's factory and test track. So Foden's, of course, all began with Edwin Foden, who worked at Plant and Hancock. After the owner's death, it was renamed Edwin Foden and Sons & Co, and they specialised in industrial engines, steam engines and traction engines. And then over the years, it then morphed, so his son Edwin Richard Foden suggested getting into the diesel engine market, and eventually they did. And of course ERF was born, and they made diesel lorries here for many years, and it was a huge part of Sandbach history. Lots of people worked here. So here's a pretty spot on my normal morning walk run route across the Trent in Mersey Canal here, just on the edge of Moston. Bridge 160. But did you know that it's known as Stabbers Bridge? After the first policeman, Cheshire policeman, killed back in 1873. He was stabbed and his body was dumped in the canal, and they reckon he was thrown in from here. I've only recently found that out myself. It's worth having a little dig about into your local history, because there's all sorts of things right under your nose. Anyway, talking about nose, let's go and talk about the dragon at Moston and the stink it made. And so we move into the realm of myth and legend. So we're at Moston here, which is damp ground, it's all flashes. And there's a tale, the tale of the Moston Dragon. And ahead we reach Dragon's Lane, clues in the name. And there was Dragon's Lake, which I'm guessing is the lake we're going to get to. So all around here apparently used to be orchards with apples that used to grow as big as your head, sucking up the water from all the flashes. But then one day a Welsh dragon flew in. They knew it was Welsh because it was red. And set up camp, abducting people, killing them. I don't know, there's several versions of this tale. And when people couldn't get to the apples because it would just make this stink which would knock them out, and then he'd eat them. But then one day a Mr. Venables comes along and then kills the dragon. He'd apparently been an archer, and so managed to kill the dragon with multiple arrows. And so the legend has gone on. Where did it come from? Do you know more? I'm intrigued. I love a story like that. And so we're going to head back into Sandbach now, to Elworth, heading past the site of the old Foden's factory, and then taking a right, passing the train station. I've got one last thing to show you, a blue plaque. Okay, I think we'll leave it here. Blue plaque for Edwin Foden, who used to live here. Yeah, the changing face of Sandbach. And all this was Foden's. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure I've missed loads of things out, and you'll let me know. in the comments. If there's enough, we'll do a part 2. Okay, take care, folks. See you all next time.